Namaskar. What will happen after we die? This is such a fundamental question. Everyone wants to know. But truly speaking and honestly speaking, we do not know. There are theories describing different theories of consciousness, describing different movement and evolution of consciousness. And of course, I follow a certain philosophy, I do a certain spiritual practice. I have my experiences through which I can infer some ideas about consciousness. What was with me before I was born? Was I there? But that's all a theory. And eventually, we have to accept that it is the matter of fate. I hope that science one day will definitively prove the consciousness, what happens to the consciousness, but it is not yet. But we have logic. So something which is more logical should win. So the worldview which is more logical should be accepted. So today I want to present you the most common ideas of consciousness and consequences of our life and of the next life. This question first I encountered when I was 3 years old. In our family, my grandfather has died, and I asked my mother, "Mother, what has happened? Why grandfather is not moving? Why he is lying down?" She said, "This is called death. He is no more." I said, "What is this death? Will I die?" She said, "Yes, you will die one day. Not now, not soon, but when you will be old, you will die." I remember I was sitting under the table and very deeply contemplating this idea that I will die. I remember I was just like kind of drawing something on the floor with a finger and thinking about it. So that is such a colorful, such a bright memory in me. It must have been very emotionally charged. Till now I remember it. So that time I thought, no, I cannot die. My intuition is just rejecting to accept the idea of death, that my consciousness will disappear. So you see, already two conflicting intuitions, two conflicting ideas. Some people believe that after this life, nothing exists. Some people believe, like I, that consciousness will endure. The consciousness is going to continue to perpetuate. Like in Bhagavad Gita, it is said, have you or me ever been non-existent? You or these kings, have they ever been an existence? So even after you perish, you will not lose your existence. So this is the second idea, that we are going to continue to exist. Now, how we are going to exist? So it is two main, and then those people who believe I am continuing to exist, then it forks into 2-3 different ideas, but mostly 3. In the Western society, in Christianity, in Islam, in Judaism, there is a belief that there will be a next existence. And Christianity, like Judaism, is mostly, the Jewish religion mostly, it is focused on the good life in the present moment, in the present society, not so much in the next existence. But Christianity has developed this idea very much, and Christianity introduced the idea of heaven and hell, eternal heaven and hell. It was not originally in Christianity. It has come about in the around year 540, something like that. It was on the Constantinople gathering. All the prominent religious leaders, they came together, and the emperor also was there. And then they banned the heresies of the Hermogen. There was one Christian thinker who was saying that we might go temporarily to hell, but later on everyone is going to be safe. Everyone going to rise back from the hell, and we are not definitive, not eternal damnation. So this idea was banned in that gathering, and that it was imposed by the state. So it was not permitted to spread the idea of second chance. There is no second chance. You die. So how logical is this? For me, it's not very logical, because in nature we do not observe that limited action causes unlimited consequences, like in Newton physics. Action has counteraction, same magnitude, not like you do this much and there is this much consequences. So my grandmother, she used to be very worried. She got sick, and then she went. She said, "Oh, I need to give, three rubles to that neighbor." I said, "Grandmother, why you worry so much? You are sick. You focus on recovery." She said, "No, if I die, for eternity, she is going to come to me and ask for this for this money." I said, "No, grandmother, you're not going to die. But I remember that impression. She was so worried that if I will not pay back, then for eternity they are going to ask me, where is my money? Where is my money? So this idea that you have done something limited and there is no stop for the consequences, to me it's not very logical. These very ideas, they stand upon the idea of consciousness, of the subject. Who is going to experience all of that? Who is going to cease to exist with death? Or who is going to endure? Who is going to transfer into another existence? So that depends how we see the consciousness. What is consciousness? So there are three. Radical materialism. Of course, there are much more ideas, but generally, very roughly, we can categorize radical materialism, radical idealism, and then a middle path. So radical materialism or reductionism, that consciousness is not something independent. It depends on the matter. It is a result of a complex physical structure. Atoms and molecules, they come together, they formed a complex structure, and that complex structure develops consciousness. They say emerging consciousness. What is the word? The consciousness emerges. Did you ever observe this anywhere? How the consciousness emerges out of matter? Just take the phone. It's very complex physical structure. If you look inside the microchip, it is so complex. But does the consciousness emerge? No, until you program it and you put applications there in the telephone. Even that, if there are all the applications, there has to be a user who is activating those. There has to be consciousness who is working on that. So the consciousness, to me, is not very logical, that it just emerges as a result of matter. So in this idea, the consciousness really depends on material structure, on the complexity of material structure. And once the complexity of that material structure is broken, the consciousness is no more. Okay? So that's one idea. Another idea, and for me it is more logical, idealism. Do I know that actually something does exist? How do I know that right now I am not dreaming? How I know that I am not imagining these things? In the movie Matrix, this idea is expressed. Morpheus asks Neo, he asks, what is real?
What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain.
What is reality? The machine gives the signals to your brain, and then you see, you taste, you smell, you see. What is reality? I look at this marker. I see the reflection of light from it. It comes to my eyes, it vibrates the nerves, it comes to the brain, and brain constructs the image of this. How do I know that the brain constructs it correctly? I don't know, truly speaking. How do I know when I am dreaming? Do I know that I am dreaming? No, I am just dreaming. And it is real for me. So what is real? The mind is real. What I see in my mind, that is the real. I don't know, that's not real. But the fact that I witness it, that is real. That I cannot deny. The fact that there is a subject, the one who is experiencing it, that I cannot deny. I cannot deny my existence. This is what I cannot deny. I cannot deny my consciousness. This is what I cannot deny. I exist. How do you know that I exist? Because there is a witness to it. And that is what we call consciousness. My consciousness witnesses existence of I, existence of the actions of my mind. So that is more logical to me. So there were also radical idealists, like Adi Shankaracharya in India. He preached, he said, Brahma Satyam, Jagat Mitya. It means the God or consciousness, absolute consciousness is reality. And universe is an illusion. So that might be so. But from the social standpoint, it is very harmful. Because what is your motivation to improve on this dream? To build something, to fight for justice, to create a well-knit society. If everything of this is just dream, the only thing you need to do is just to awaken from this dream. So from the social standpoint, this philosophy is harmful. Materialist philosophy is also harmful from social standpoint. If the physical, crude physicality is the only reality and the consciousness is the production of that reality and the consciousness will disappear when I die, then what is my motivation to better myself, to work on my consciousness, to evolve? What is my motivation? There is no motivation also. Very big motivation. Of course, there is an internal drive. We are inclined, because it is also property of our consciousness, to improve ourselves. That's how we feel good. We are programmed for that, but that's not the matter, not the atom, not the molecule programmed for the improvement. It is the consciousness. So, and there is a middle path. My guru, he preached, he said, Brahma Satyam, Jagadapi Satyam, Apekshikam. Absolute consciousness is reality. Universe, the physical, the matter, is also reality. But it is a relative truth. It is a relative truth. What means relative and absolute truth? Take example of the ocean. The ocean, let's say it is truth. Are the waves of the ocean truth? Yes, they are. But they don't have a separate existence without consciousness. The consciousness is the fundamental underlying reality, and the waves, they have relative existence. But they do exist. We cannot deny the existence. So the wave, when it exists, when there is a consciousness, fundamental consciousness, and our life, our personality is the wave in that consciousness. So when I die, will the wave die? No. Do you see that the waves in ocean just disappear? No. They have to transfer their energy somewhere, and the wave continues in some way. It lives in ocean. So I cannot just disappear. I have to continue existing in some form. in the future. So in this paradigm, that the consciousness is the fundamental reality and the universe is also reality, that our existence is also reality, but it depends on consciousness. In this worldview, karma is a very logical idea. So karma, in short, it is that we exist and we continue existing after getting reborn. When I was a child, I remember different memories of what I consider now my past lives. Of course, it can be my different hallucinations and productions of my brain, but to me it's very unlikely, and to me it's very logical to understand this was my past lives. This idea of karma, most definitely it was expressed in India, but not only in India. It was not foreign to the Western philosophy and to the Western stream of mind, the philosophical thought. For example, Pythagoras, which is one of the fundamental figures in Greek civilization, he was not only believing in the continued existence of consciousness, but he was narrating his belief that he has lived several lives. One time he came to the temple of Hera, and he saw a shield, and that shield was, armor. He recognized that shield. He said, "It was my shield. In one of my past lives, I was a Thorpe, the warrior during the Trojan War, and that is the precise, exact shield which I have carried." He said that I remember myself being a Phalit as a son of Hermes, the god Hermes, and the god has asked, would be Pythagoras, he asked him, wish anything except for eternal life. And then he said, then I wish to remember my existence. And then he said, I was a Phalit, then I was a Thorpe, then I was Germatim, then I was Pir, and finally I have become Pythagoras. Socrates, he also kind of believed in the, not maybe exactly past life, but into the existence of consciousness, before and beyond this life. Like, even before his execution, he was telling that in human soul, there is a recognition of beauty. We are remembering it. There is a recognition of logic. There is a recognition of justice. How do we know all of those things? If we just are born now and we are just these bodies, how we know those things? How we are able to recognize that? Even many of you watch meditation steps and you hear what I say, and you are kind of remembering those things. You are kind of recognizing those things. They're already there in you. You know, oh, this looks, yeah, it is true. We recognize what is true and what is not true. Why? Why there are children who are genius? I saw some children performing musical instruments. I cannot imagine how they can do that. Why there are geniuses like Mozart, Pascal, Rainer Maria Rilke? How they exist? When I read Rainer Maria Rilke, I think 30 years old, how he can write this kind of poetry? That beauty, that sense of beauty, that sense of wisdom, that profound truth which he conveys in his poems. How is this possible? How would that be possible if we would just be a new collection of atoms and molecules without consciousness within us? I remember when I started to meditate, and also I promise to you, if you start meditating, in half a year about, you will just awake to the fact, oh, I have become so wise. How did this happen? So this happened to me. I thought, wow, how do I know all of those things? Why? Why do I know all of those things? Nobody taught me those things. They're just simply coming out of my inner consciousness. All those ideas, all those understandings. How do I know? So Socrates, he used to call those as a remembering, that the soul remembers which is already there inside. And then he said, so, therefore, it must be that we existed before and we will exist after. And then he took the poison because he was executed. When he was offered to run away from his execution, he said, no, this will be against my philosophy. So it was not this idea of existence, of consciousness, was not foreign to the Western thought process. To me, this idea of karma, that we live, and karma, I'm going to record one big video. Karma is just like almost Newtonian physics. And sometimes also depressing. Because it creates the picture of mechanical world. So there is a karma, and there is a way out of the karma. The element of grace, element of divine interference, which makes really the world a beautiful place. So that I'm going to explain in the new video. So let's draw our conclusions. Number one, life is not an accident. Life is the process of evolution. Consciousness is not a byproduct of matter. Rather, it is the fundamental reality. Death is not an end. Death is just a transfer of consciousness from one body to another body. Just like I'm taking off one cloth which has been worn out and I'm putting on a new cloth. Karma is the logic of this evolution. It removes, like in the different worldviews, there is this, just accident. Everything happens accidentally. No cause and effect. Our intuitions rejects this idea. Another idea is that it is the will of God. God likes you, loves you, He will favor you. Or not. This also is, our soul doesn't accept it. It rejects this logic. Like during the World War II, the Nazis, they were, sometimes torturing the captives of the concentration camps by doing something very illogical. Sometimes they will favor them and reward them for nothing. Sometimes they will punish them for nothing. And that completely breaks the person. He understands there is no logic and always feels in fear. So we also reject this idea that it is just a voluntarism of the divine entity, voluntarism of God. The God does what He likes. No, we somehow feel that there must be a system and there must be a logic, there must be responsibility, there must be cause and effect. So karma is it coincides nicely with our intuitions and with our logic. Of course, we cannot prove it for a moment. I hope the science one day will prove it. But it is logical, therefore it might be true. So what do you think about it? Write in the comments. Do you think that consciousness is just byproduct of matter and it will disappear when we die? Or maybe you have your own theory, or you think we will exist, we will be reborn again, or do you think we are going to heaven or we are going to hell? Write what is logical to you. I would like to discuss with you in the comments. Thank you very much and namaskar.